Okay, I would suggest that we make a start. For those of you who've joined on time, or in fact early, I think it's only fair. Um, we're here today to talk about ASD in data centers, and particularly how cooling affects not just our design of the detection system, but the performance of it. Just a couple of requests before we start. Please, can you switch your microphones off and your cameras? It just keeps the traffic down and the bandwidth okay for the presentation. This is what we're going to run through today. I'm going to start by talking about the challenges and the risks. We'll look at the solutions and also touch on the regulations and standards that apply. We will then, forgive me, talk about the reference sites that Securiton have got extensively across the world. And finally, give our verdict or summarize how Securiton ASD can actually help in these still extremely popular and ever complicated environments. Before we go too far, I just to introduce myself. My name is Justin McNamara. I am the marketing director for the UK and Ireland for Securiton International. As you can tell from my video, I'm not necessarily a young man. I've been in the fire industry over 30 years with over 25 years specific experience in aspirating smoke detection technology. But I have a broad experience of detection technologies generally, and wide experience across EMEA, particularly in business. And it's a trick of biology that I'm still only 38 years old. You can see my contact details there if you need to contact me. As I say, I look after our business in the UK and Ireland, but I'm equally happy to direct you to one of my colleagues should you have a request or a project elsewhere in the world. So let me start by rephrasing or mentioning again the question: is cooling making life harder for smoke detection in a data center? And I think the answer obviously is yes, it is. But it's not making it impossible. It's just making it a little bit trickier. And we will hopefully cover through the course of this presentation how it is indeed possible. We'll start by looking at the risk itself. So that's data centers, but also the ever-growing list of ways airflow actually appears within a data center, the different types. And you can see, and I know some of it may seem obvious, but you can see that detection and particularly prescriptive code compliance detection designs may not help us within a data center. We think about your typical data center, and there is one shown on screen now, and we've got a large number of potential challenges. Obviously, it's a very sensitive environment. There's some very sensitive equipment in there. There will be servers that are processing data that are vital for us to effectively keep operating. It might be to keep our business operating. It might be so that we've got access to our mobile phones and our data, our banking information. It may simply be communication to keep in touch with work colleagues or family members, but that data center really must keep operating. We cannot really live without it anymore. And what we find typically in all these environments is that there is a high airflow. It's interesting that when you go into a data center, you can hear the noise of the air traveling. All of you will be familiar with that. And as I say, these rooms, these environments, these buildings, they just cannot suffer any interruption. And that really is where aspirating comes into its own. So we talked about the high airflow, and I will talk again in a second, but something else to be aware of is dilution. Because of that very high airflow, fast air movement, smoke, particularly in its very early stage, is diluted by all that high airflow. That potentially clean air just dilutes polluted air that contains little bits of smoke. And it's a real problem for devices that aren't sophisticated enough to pick up the very small early bits of smoke. You think about a data center in detail, and we will see air movement in many directions, and it may not always be designed and operating the same way as we would wish. Air will move perhaps in different directions. We'll talk in a moment about the difference between hot and cool aisles, but smoke will not get to the stage where a typical point detector will operate early enough. A point detector may not actually ever see the smoke. Let's remember that a point detector, it's a passive device. Smoke has to travel to it. In these types of environment where the air is being forced at potentially great speeds around the room, it's possible that a point detector will not actually see the smoke at all. And I have a couple of pictures here. One is from one of our design documents, and it's not a kind of kid's drawing of how air flows. This is, you know, real stuff. You will find in a data center that these let me put my pointer on just one moment. These red lines actually indicate warm air, but you can see that it's a real scattergun pattern. And then underneath the floor, if you can see here, we've got cooler air. But all of these movements, they're mixed up, and if something has gone wrong, smoke is traveling around, perhaps in an uncontrolled fashion, certainly not where a point detector is likely to be. It's very tricky, I think would be the summary, but not impossible. I actually Googled airflow pattern in data center and selected a picture at random from an air cooling company. And you can see here even that their own airflow pattern designs from the actual people who manufacture the cooling systems. It's tricky. There are various colors, various temperatures, and we can see that the airflow pattern is not uniform. It is a tricky environment to provide detection in. I mentioned earlier that I would talk briefly about the difference between hot and cold aisles, and this is just one example here. We can see on the left-hand side of the picture that we have what's called the hot aisle. So that is warm air that is being pushed out from the server rack. But behind it on the other side, we can see where the cool air is coming in from the room cooling system. And smoke will behave very differently in a cool aisle and a hot aisle. Obviously, one of the things that we will all recognize is that warm air will make smoke rise a lot more. Cool air, it will just struggle to rise to the top. You add into that the velocity of the air that's being pushed around and through the server rack, it is making life difficult. And it's something else that perhaps we need to be aware of. These environments have got voids, both ceiling and floor. And as we can see here, we have duct type arrangements to provide the cooling and the extract of the warm air. It's not an easy environment to provide detection in. This is a bit more detail and perhaps shows this better. We have the top picture here, which is cold aisle containment, and at the bottom we have hot aisle containment. And we can see that there are at various places, points where we need to think about detection. And we'll have different ways of looking at the detection policy, whether it's up here in a ceiling void. We need to be very careful about the detection, whether it's the cold aisle, it's not much is happening, there's little air movement, but here down the bottom in the hot aisle, we've got potentially fast air movements, and it's really quite warm. The ceiling is being used as the return air plenum. It's tricky. And then I mentioned earlier about accessibility. These rooms are often quite congested, particularly in their void spaces, whether they're ceiling or floor. They will be congested with cable trays, cables itself, pipes for cooling, lighting, other forms of monitoring. They're congested spaces, and accessing them is very tricky, even if accessing the data center area itself is permitted. Actually then physically getting to areas and points within the void spaces is very tricky. You think about a raised floor, and perhaps most of us, when we go in a data center after it's operating, we won't necessarily see just how congested the floor space is, but you lift up a floor tile and you will see, generally speaking, that they're very congested spaces with lots of cabling, and access, particularly for maintenance, is very tricky. The I suppose the fallout really, and I mentioned it right at the start, the fallout from data centers not operating is quite significant. Even if we ignore, let's say, the personal fallout for us, I would personally be distraught if I cannot access, for example, my text messaging service or my WhatsApp. I then can't keep in contact with friends or family. And I make light of that, but the serious business is that according to the US Bureau of Labor, 93% of companies that suffer a data loss. Now, that may be perhaps more to do with hacking than fire damage, but 93% of companies are out of business within 5 years. Furthermore, from a different study, 43% of businesses never reopen again after a disaster of some kind, and that would include a fire-related incident. And then on top of that 43%, 29% will close within 2 years. And just generally, 2 out of 5 companies that experience a disaster or a catastrophe from an extended system outage, they just never resume operations. And a further third go out of business within 2 years. So we're trying to help these companies, these systems, keep operational so that they stay in business for many years to come. It's not a a selfish wish. We all benefit from the services that these data centers and data operator centers perform. And it's, maybe for some of us, it's a different mindset where we're not really protecting people. Obviously, that's incredibly important. We're not actually really protecting the building or the equipment. What we're really doing is protecting the business and keeping it going. Most of the fires that are reported in these buildings, they involve the electrical distribution equipment and are not necessarily caused by the server racks or the operation of the data center itself. And the other factor that is key in these environments, that smoke is a thing that really damages the servers themselves. It's one thing to detect the smoke early enough, but what we need to do is then start to deal with the issue so that the smoke, as opposed to fire damage, doesn't cause adverse effects on the servers themselves. That's a really key point. And towards the end of the presentation, I will suggest a cause and effect for how we should operate the detection protocols in data centers. I'm going to switch tack just a little bit and talk about the solutions that we Securiton can offer, and then also briefly mention some of the regulations and the standards that do and can apply in this vertical of data centers. I've highlighted here on this screen not just the range of aspirating detectors that Securiton offers, but I've deliberately put an arrow in on this section, sample points, and I would focus on what we call Class A. Now, I'm about in a moment to talk briefly about a product testing standard called EN54 Part 20, but I want to focus on the Class A version of that. That is, Class A equates to high sensitivity, very early warning capability, and all of Securiton's devices have capacity in that area, from the small, tiny, forgive me, baby ones like the ASD 531 that is capable of having 6 Class A holes, all the way up to the much bigger devices, the ASD 535, where we can handle up to 36 Class A holes, and then obviously anywhere in between. It's really key to have the range that we do, so that we're able to provide a device that will suit virtually all configurations, all types of data centers. So I mentioned EN54 Part 20. It's been around for a long time now. It is the bespoke, specific standard for the testing and approval of aspirating smoke detectors, which gives us the defined categories of Class A and indeed Class B and Class C, but Class A is our focus here. And it is the de facto European standard for aspirating smoke detectors, and determines the quality of the aspirating detector, and perhaps most importantly, the performance criteria. We can talk for a long time about how EN54 works, but one of the great things in Securiton is the pipe flow design software allows us to know exactly what our performance is going to be from an aspirating detector. So we don't need to be fire modeling experts or mathematicians. The pipe flow software will tell us what the outcome of our design is, and if we've complied with, achieved Class A or not. Something else that is very close to my heart, being in the United Kingdom, is the FIA's Code of Practice for Aspirating Systems. And it's a very useful document. If you haven't heard of it, we can provide it free of charge. It is a free download off the FIA website. As far as I'm aware, it is the only code of practice around that reflects EN 54 Part 20, and the only one giving specific information regarding detection, sensitivity, and response time. It's actually undergoing an upgrade at the moment. It's a committee that I'm thankful to be involved in, but it is a great document and it is generic. As much as I would love you to take the specific great documents that Securiton has, and we've actually just produced a specific design guide for data centers that we can make available to you. The FIA document is generic and can be used extensively across the world as not being tied to any particular manufacturer, and it allows people to create specifications should they wish that are not manufacturer tied, so to speak. Further afield, and depending on the part of the world that you might operate in, or indeed what specification you're trying to comply with, there are American based documents, the NFPA 75, which is the standard for fire protection in information technology equipment environments. I actually come across it a fair bit from my work in Ireland, and I know that in the Middle East there are often NFPA requirements. There's a lot of information, particularly in NFPA 75, that talks about the value of very early warning in IT equipment environments, and lots of information that is useful. In the UK, and I apologise again for being UK specific, we have also BS 6266, which is an enhanced standard to cover fire detection design within electronic data processing areas and areas of high airflow. And there's a lot of information that ties in beautifully with not just the aforementioned FIA document, but also with the way that we Securiton approach our design. So we can think about, as shown on the right hand side here, a code compliant design where I have tubes and sample points covering the data center room space. I have pipe work also covering the return air grills of the air handling units, but also from the FIA, they provide us with the pointers to really dig deep into our design and reflect on what's going to be most appropriate, to not necessarily be prescriptive and follow code. So you can see a particular paragraph here that I've highlighted, that the strategic positioning of detection is advantageous rather than strict adherence to spacing recommendations, and that this will often provide better and less costly solutions. We can really be flexible and enhance aspirating design to provide the best detection depending upon the environment and the airflow with which we're providing the detection. So let's all be aware of that. Prescriptive designs are very, very helpful, but in data centers with wonderful and, dare I say it, weird airflow patterns, aspirating is a real vote winner. And there's more data here, again, specifically from the FI Code of Practice, which talks in great detail about airflow, so helping us to design the system that's fit for purpose and will provide the appropriate response within a given time frame. I'm going to take a few slides here just to make sure that you know that we definitely have the expertise here. We've been doing aspirating at Securiton for over 50 years now. And over the last 20 plus years, as data centers have started to appear, we've started to create a great wealth of experience and a huge library of projects that we've secured with certainly with our aspirating smoke detection, but also with our Securifier fire platform. So I'm going to run you through just a few of them here. One thing I would like to point out is that we're not majoring on a particular country or even continent here. We've got global experience from Sweden through to Turkey, plenty of experience in the Far East and in China. And what you'll also notice is that it's a variety of different end users as well. So we're not, I'm afraid the English phrase is one-trick ponies. We've got real deep experience and involvement in data centers for a whole variety of end users across the world. We have a lovely example up here at the top, what's known as the Green Data Center in Switzerland, which is where our headquarters are, but also data centers at the bottom there. You can see the Bridge Data Center in Malaysia. We really have the experience to back up what we say. And I love the fact that we're, also operating as well in India, Brazil, Vietnam, and Saudi Arabia. We've developed our knowledge over many years, and we are absolutely delighted to share it with you. I'm drawing towards the end of the official presentation, and then we'll pause a bit for a bit of Q&A. But if I was to offer a verdict, given the question that I posed right at the start, is cooling making life harder? I'd just summarize with some claims that we make and then talk about the proof. So, we will claim, and it is correct, that we have the most reliable and early detection. And the proof of that is that we've got active air sampling. We are actively drawing air in, analyzing it for the particles, smoke particles that we know none of us want to see. We have adjustable sensitivity so that we can set the detectors to suit the environments that they're in, and we can even adjust the power of the aspirator, the pump, so that we're able to absolutely provide the best detection. We're also able to, there's a slide in a second that really illustrates this. We're able to provide efficient serviceability. If you think about a floor void and sampling pipe work underneath it, if I design carefully and correctly, I won't need to actually get into that floor void. I won't have to lift the tiles up. There are ways of carefully designing to make sure that I'm not getting into the floor void. The next slide, I think, will illustrate this in great detail, but aspirating with its multi-staged alarms is absolutely fantastic in helping us to control and stage various actions based on smoke alarms that we receive. And what you'll also benefit by working with from Securiton is engineering support. I'll talk in a couple of slides more about exactly how we do things, but we can help you from right from the start of a project all the way through to the end. I mentioned maintenance, and this is real data, and it astonishes me sometimes that people aren't more aware of this. When I compare the maintenance that is involved in looking after, let's say, 510 point type smoke detectors, and I compare that to aspirating system that has got maybe a total of 510 as well, so they equate 1-to-1. If I compare the amount of labor, and obviously time is the expensive thing here, involved in those two different systems, it is unbelievable the amount of potential time and therefore money that I can save by using an aspirating system. It's not only at the commissioning stage, but let's say every year or however frequently maintenance needs to be conducted, I can make a massive saving. So it's an extra advantage. If there was one needed, I would have, forgive me, thought that the advanced early detection is enough to support aspirating smoke detection in data centers, but the added advantage of potential saving is quite phenomenal. I talked about the flexibility of response, and this is a good slide to talk about how aspirating can really help within a data center environment. We have multiple stages of alarms that are programmable. So if I, and bear with me as I imagine an unfortunate scenario where a fire has begun within a data center, I will pick up early indications of smoke. I will trigger a first alert alarm. It's left unchecked and I've triggered a second alert alarm. Still unchecked, still undealt with. I've still got a third alarm, and I'm starting then to perhaps move the data processing from the data center, perhaps call the fire brigade. These are just personal suggestions. If I still haven't dealt sufficiently with the problem, I then would get perhaps an alarm equivalent to that of a point detector. I've begun to evacuate the area and isolate the zone or the area that's causing the problem. And finally, if still unchecked, that fire, then I have a fifth alarm, which might start the first knock or the first trip of the extinguishing system or suppression system. But the flexibility there of staged alarms at different levels from an aspirating detector is really key to ASD within data centers. Our support, as I said, is kind of unwavering from right from the start of a project through to the end. We have the design guide that I mentioned earlier, which is specific to data centers. We can help you all the way through from design right through to the end of commissioning and beyond. All our information is available free on the Securiton website. If you struggle to find it or have any difficulties, then do not hesitate to contact us. We also, as part of our aim to be as helpful as possible, we've got a design team. In fact, a couple of them who can help us create designs. They can work from CAD drawings. We can provide the pipe flow calculations. We can really help your project. Forgive me, we are the experts in aspirating smoke detection. Please use our services to help with your project. I'm going to wrap up in a second and just reiterate the answer to my own question. Is cooling making life harder? Yes, it is. Yes, undoubtedly. But it's not making it impossible. And we at Securiton, with our range of ASD, we've found the solutions, and we can help you make your detection life easier within any data center environment. I do thank you for your attention. You can also check us out on our social media channels. We have a LinkedIn page, Instagram, and TikTok. And again, I have put my email address, my Securiton email address at the bottom there. I'm going to pause to have a very small glass of water and see if we've got any questions, Zach.
Thank you, Justin. I've got a few questions, so after you drink some water, I'll start asking them to you.
I'm ready to go.
Okay. The first question is it true that you won Mr. Universe in 1998?
Oh, that's a very personal question. I think that's a plant. No, I wish. I think growing up as a kid, I used to watch the Mr. Universe competition, and I think I went to the gym once in my entire life. But no, um, what you see is natural, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. The next question is you mentioned the REK. Can you tell us a little bit more about that REK system?
Oh yeah, that was right at the start, and I almost mentioned it in passing, but it's a very clever addressable aspirating system. We have multi-pipe versions. You can put up to 8 separate tubes, each with a detection device attached to the tube, and therefore you can address 8 separate cabinets or 8 separate areas within an environment. It gives us pinpoint detection. It's a very clever and reliable detection system within these environments.
Thank you. The next question is if you mentioned it, I missed it, but is pressure differential important?
Oh, I didn't mention it, so that's a good question, and thank you for whoever asked that for reminding me. Yeah, pressure differential can be really important in data center environments. You think about the cooling, which I mentioned quite a few times. Cooling and the air movement, it means that if you put an aspirating detector outside the room, the data center where you're actually detecting, that could be in a corridor. It might be a very, very different pressure to the room where we're actually detecting. So it's probable in that case that we wouldn't pipe the exhaust from the ASD back into the data center, so we equalize the pressure across the detector. So that's a good question.
Thank you again. The next question is there a way to get a copy of the FIA code?
Yeah, I did mention it. You're very willing just to go on the FIA's, it's the UK's Fire Industry Association website, or if you drop any of us a line, including me, we can just provide a copy. It's a freely available document. So either the FIA website or contact any one of us at Securiton.
Okay, the next question is do you have any more reference sites than that were shown in your presentation?
Yeah, we have a lot more. I could spend a 2-hour presentation going through the long list. If you need anything specific, again, just reach out to us. But I think the design guide talks about and has a long list of projects that we've done. But yeah, we have literally hundreds of examples of data centers that we've been involved in. So it's a much longer list than I was able to show.
Is that really true? You will assist us with ASD designs because it takes a lot of time. Sometimes it's complex. So any help from Securiton will very much be appreciated.
Yeah, it is true, and I know it perhaps seems unbelievable or is perhaps too refreshing, but it's the way we like to operate. We want to help our partners. If we help, uh, we get forgive me, a correct design. We are here to help. We want to support as much as we can, and it's bluntly in our own interest to be as helpful as we can. So no, it was not a typo. I didn't misspeak. If you have a project, particularly for a data center that you want us to help with, just let us know and we'll help.
Next question, what performance test should be conducted as part of commissioning?
Good question. So maybe I rely too much on my UK knowledge, but the FI code of practice that I've mentioned a few times talks about something called a wire burn test, where we connect a short piece of wire to an electrical charge, which burns off the PVC coat of the wire. It'll give off very small amounts of smoke, and then the ASD will detect it. That officially, in UK terms, is the specific test that we're supposed to do as part of the commissioning process. I think across Europe and beyond, there are different tests that have been adopted, but that seems to be the most popular. But again, we have documentation in the Securiton library that talks about commissioning and the commissioning process and the tests that can and should be conducted. But it's something, again, that we can assist you with.
Thank you. The next question is, did you show something on battery gas detection? I may have missed it or not
No,
found
I
it.
didn't, and I wish I had, but it's something that we're now starting to move into. We Securiton have a partnership with a company called Infrasensing, and we have some VOC detection systems that are going to help us massively when lithium-ion battery failure is a risk. So we'll perhaps add that to our notes and send it out, or again, just contact us. The partnership is relatively new, but we are moving into that space in a big way. So again, good question.
And the last question that I have today is, how do I get access to Pipeflow?
So it's downloadable from the Securiton website, but that requires registration. Again, if you're not registered on the site, please do so. And if you have any difficulties, then again, just contact us and we will talk you through it. We'll get things organized for you.